For the benefit of those who may not have read the draft, what are the changes that are being proposed?
I think one of the biggest things is the centralization of a database. The other thing is that coaches and officials of national sports federations are also going to be held liable.
But there wasn't really punitive action that was proposed in the previous draft, whereas here there is strict action where they'll be banned for 2 years.
We must remember that even in the 2010 code, Amita, before that code came in, there was a provision for a 2-year ban. But when the 2010 code came in on age fraud, somebody quietly removed the 2-year ban provision that had been in place before.
How does this help address the issue at a grassroots level?
If you go down to the state level, the code may not be applicable there because sport is a state subject, and every state and every union territory need to embrace this and have its own code against age fraud in sport. I think this is very important. If we take the titles away, take the prizes away, take the prize money away, and ask the parents to refund some of the expenses involved in national camps, particularly if a junior player has been selected and his or her age has been found to be fraud, then I think more and more people will be afraid of fudging age.
Should there also be a case for, let's say, rehabilitation or for a second opportunity for such an athlete, because they may have made a mistake?
The question is who's going to do this? The problem is federations are already short of budgets. Imagine them having to do a workshop for a set of 50 parents whose children are indulging in age fraud.
Welcome to Raising an Athlete. Today we are diving into a topic that's been an open secret in Indian sports for years: age fraud. We've all heard stories of athletes fudging their age to compete in younger categories, often with the help of parents, coaches, or even officials. But why does this keep happening? And what's finally being done about it? The Ministry of Youth Affairs and Sports has recently issued a new draft national code against age fraud in sports 2025, and this document is open for public feedback till April 15th. This new draft promises stricter documentation through a centralized digital database, tougher penalties for athletes, coaches, and even officials, and also a whistleblower system. But the big question is, will it actually be enforced effectively? To break it all down, we've got someone who's seen it all in Indian sports, Mr. Rajaraman. If you follow Indian sports, you've heard his name. He's been in the industry for over 42 years, covering everything from Olympics and Asian Games to Cricket World Cups and World Athletic Championships. He was the media attaché for the Team India at Paris 2024 Olympics. With his experience working with top media houses and as a former media advisor to Sports Authority of India, he's got some incredible insights into this issue. So, let's get started. Hi Raj, welcome to Raising an Athlete. And thank you so much for making time for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Amita, for inviting me to this platform. You've been doing some fabulous work. Some of us think that you are a threat because you're doing some amazing work. Some of us journalists, but your focus is very sharp and you're raising an athlete. I think what you're doing is outstanding work. Please keep doing
Thanks so much, Raj. I think you've been such an encouragement on this journey also. And I think today we are discussing a topic which is very pertinent around age fraud in sports. The Sports Ministry has issued a new draft, which is in the consultation phase right now. And all people interested in the space, which is coaches, administrators, sport athletes, parents, everybody is welcome to submit their own recommendations or suggestions on this till 31st March. So the idea of this conversation is to kind of cover the different nuances of what is being proposed in the draft, what's the issue at hand, and help our audience decide their own thoughts and reflect on the issue. So I think I'd like to start with talking about age fraud just as an issue which is very well known in Indian sport over years, and it's persisted for so long. What do you think are the structural issues which have led to this?
Amita, thank you for asking this question. It is one of the three biggest integrity issues that Indian sport faces. Of course, it is world sport. This is a problem that abounds around the world, but in India more so. Primarily, if you're looking at doping, which is very, very big in India, we're probably number one at this point of time in the world list, and that's a very dubious list to be topping. Then there is betting and match fixing. It does happen. We've had instances in cricket and other sport of investigation. But age fraud is something that very little has been spoken about in public. It's only angry parents of children who are competing against older kids. They are sometimes very agitated. There have been a couple of CBI investigations into questions on table tennis players some years ago, but it is one of the most rampant issues in Indian sport. And it is rampant primarily because children use this. Sometimes it is not them, it is their parents or their coaches who induce them to fudge their age and compete in a different age group to their own. Primarily because you can get admissions in colleges, or you could get jobs based on your junior national certificate, or you could get scholarships. There are plenty of these things that happen. There is a lot of attraction for young players to fudge their age a little bit and to try and compete with younger kids. I think it is one of those basic principles in sport of fair play that is violated here, not just by the young athlete, but by their parents and coaches as well. So this is a good step. What the government has now done is a good step. Of course, it existed. There was a code that has been in place from 2010 onwards. This is just being refurbished, revamped a little bit, but with the central database that's coming up with the government of India through the Sports Authority of India, I think it's a good step. But like most things, Amita, the intention alone is not going to be enough. You need political will, and you need a very strong intent to pursue this to its logical end. I think where you're saying people can be banned for 2 years, you must implement that. And if you don't do that, then this remains another code on paper. At the moment, there are 2 or 3 critical documents that this ministry has come out with. One is the National Sports Policy. The other is the Code for Governance, the National Sports Code being revised. There is a bill that's been proposed. I think all this remain on paper. Even when they're actualized, they need to be implemented well for India to take those steps forward.
Right. So I think we will speak extensively about the different aspects of the draft that's been issued, also in terms of the implementation challenges. But before all of that, if you could share a little for the benefit of those who may not have read the draft, what are the changes that are being proposed? The previous one was issued in April 2010. From then to now, what are the changes in the new draft? What really is being proposed?
I think one of the biggest things is the centralization of a database. We moved into the digital era. This creation of a database is very possible, and its maintenance is very possible. So if you get your child into the database once and for all, you don't need to keep verifying age back and forth again. At every national championship, you don't need to do that. So the central database, I think it is a great step. There have been instances of young athletes moving sport from one sport to other, where their age has been found out in one sport. They go to another sport and start playing there in a different age group. So that will get eliminated through the central database. The other thing is that coaches and officials of national sports federations are also going to be held liable. I think that's a different step to what we've seen from before. To hold somebody accountable, I think it is very, very critical. And if there are some examples of coaches who have done this and who have been penalized, other coaches will be a little hesitant to do anything like this. I think it's a good step. Primarily, one is the creation of the central database, and the second is the punishment for both coaches and officials of national sports federations in case they are found to be violating some of the provisions.
Also for the athletes, I suppose that in the past it said that they would be age adjusted if a violation was found, but there wasn't really a punitive action that was proposed in the previous draft, whereas here there is strict action where they'll be banned for 2 years and so on and so forth.
Yes, definitely. I think it's also critical that even earlier, we must remember that even in that 2010 code, Amita, before that code came in, there was a provision for a 2-year ban. But when the 2010 code came in on age fraud, somebody quietly removed the 2-year ban provision that had been in place before. So we don't know until the draft is complete and until we see the full and final shape of the code. We don't know what it is going to have and what it not. The draft itself is exciting because it does punish the athlete, it does punish the coaches for indulging in age fraud, and punishes some of the federation officials if they are found to be guilty of facilitating age fraud. Also, the other thing is that the new code proposes a whistleblower policy. So some of the people who have been championing the cause who have been championing against age fraud we'll find it encouraging that they can go out, use the whistleblower policy and pick up a little bit of money in the process. They're supposed to be putting in a 2,000 rupee deposit, but if they actually succeed in showing that somebody is fudged the age, they get a 5,000 rupee reward in return. So I think it is a great step. The whistleblower is a positive step as well.
Raj, help me understand in terms of how does this help address the issue at a grassroots level? Because I think age fraud starts right at the junior level, at the school tournament, at the district level where you're playing. Now, my understanding is that this draft is obviously addressed at a higher NSF when you're part of a federation, when the sports association is kind of enforcing it. Whereas while there is a talk about creating more awareness at the level of the academy or at the level of educational institution, but it's not enforcement or it's not punitive. It's not expected for you at that level, if you're a junior athlete, to be submitting any kind of strict age proof of that there isn't any action. You have thoughts on how is there a need for action to be taken at a junior level and addressing this issue right at the grassroots level where it actually starts from?
Amita, primarily age fraud is all about junior sport and sub-junior sport. And if it is happening at the national level, there is some kind of punishment that happens. At least you are adjusted into a different age group, into a higher age group if it is available. Suppose you are competing in 16 and you're actually 17 or 18, you're moved to the under 18 age group. That exists at this point of time. But I think what is critical is that if you go down to the state level, the code may not be applicable there because sport is a state subject. And every state and every union territory need to embrace this and have its own code against age fraud in sport. When that happens is when you will see a lot of cleaning up happening. At the moment, this is focused primarily on the national level athletes. It must go, if you are very serious about cleaning up sport and ensuring that the rights of young athletes are protected by not letting them play against older athletes, and ensuring that they don't face the risk of injury when they are competing against older athletes, especially in combat sport. I think states have to employ the same code. They'll have to embrace it. They'll have to introduce their own codes. We haven't seen much of this in the earlier era. The 2010 code, for example, also says that states and union territories are encouraged to embrace the code. But I haven't known too many states and union territories to follow that. I only hope that there is political will as India is moving forward to becoming a good sporting nation, if not a great sporting nation. These are some things that we need to be very sure that are not happening. We need to root out age fraud from Indian sport completely. And for that to happen, we need to have will across political parties, across states, across the whole spectrum. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when I played the Junior National Championship, we always suspected a few players in our own team and in other teams of being older than us, of not making the age group bracket. But if the states were allowing that to happen, if the union territory teams were allowing that to happen because they want to win a medal, because they want to be on the podium, then it becomes very difficult for the center to start taking action. So it has to start at the grassroots level. At the time where somebody is getting admitted into a club, I think, Amitabh, we need to ensure that the Aadhaar card or the birth certificate or any of those documents that the government recommend, about 6 or 7 documents that the government approves. If this happens, then I think sport will become clean. Until that time, this will remain on paper with very little action being taken at the grassroots level. There are many athletes who are very content being their state champions, but don't get to the national web at all. So they're very happy winning at the ground level and stopping the others from rising, those younger athletes from rising. So it becomes important that states and union territories join hands with the center and ensure that there is a uniform policy across the country for age fraud.
And just going back to the question, even at the level of, because the current draft doesn't really enforce it at a school or a junior level in that sense. The enforcement part of it really comes in only at a federation level. So could there be more stringent enforcement, or is that something difficult to do when it is at, let's say, a school or a district level?
No, at the national level, which is where national federations come into play, at the national level, they're doing the best they can. But if you really want to root it out, then you need to go down, and every state and union territory administration must have its own code against age fraud. until we see that, Mita, there will be issues, there will be complaints, and sometimes the medical tests are not accepted by courts as well. Of course, the court lays down what kind of tests will be held, what kind of tests will be conducted, whether bone density. Sometimes they take the wrist, sometimes they look at the jaw, sometimes they look at the elbows, sometimes they look at the teeth formation. So for different age categories, they've got different tests. There has to be, around the world, there is no acceptable test. That my understanding is that there is no acceptable test to determine age. You can kind of find out a period of age. You can't specify saying somebody is 18 years old. You can say this person is between 17 and 19. So there is a little bracket that comes through. You can't specify age at the moment based on the tests that are recommended. So there is a bit of science involved, but more than science, I think it is the political will that has been lacking in this country. There are many young athletes whose careers have been stymied because they have had to play against athletes who are a lot older than them, and nothing has been done about it. I know the Athletics Federation has been very stringent. I've been to their junior national competitions where the moment they put up a tent which says age verification tent, some of the kids who are overage turn their backs and go away. There are some who are sent for age verification tests. There are some who try and argue their way through to get to competition. But I know the Athletics Federation and even the Weightlifting Federation, I've seen in some cases where people have been turned back for being overage. They've changed their names and tried to come back and compete in Khelo India competition in Pune some years ago. And I've seen the Weightlifting Federation President Sadev Yadav actually get hold of a couple of young athletes like this and send them back. This is actually criminal, but there is no provision within the sports code or within the age fraud, the age code that government is talking about, that it has in place. There is no provision for criminal action. So until there is a will, and it's not just political will, Amita, parents have to will it because they should want India to succeed in sport. And the only way India is going to succeed in sport is to have a very clean approach, both in terms of age, in terms of doping, and in terms of betting and match fixing. If we can keep our integrity of sport very, very clean and pure, I think India will progress. Sometimes the progress may seem to be slow, but age fraud has actually stymied how we've grown as a sport nation.
I think it's also a reflection of, like, I'm saying in context of incentives that parents have. Eventually, everything is driven by the different incentives that the different stakeholders may have to behave in a certain way. Like in India, we also have this culture of, win at any cost. And sometimes the systemic support is very less. So while policies do play a role, policies such as this, but it is also about addressing and creating more broad-based support for the athlete themselves, which does not push, let's say, those parents or those athletes to such extremes where they feel that it's do or die, and they would even resort to unethical measures for succeeding.
Definitely. One of the things that I've always maintained is that it's not the athlete, it's not the young athlete who want to fudge age. It's only maybe at 17 or 18 that they start doing that. But it happens even at an earlier stage because parents want their child to win desperately. I think this desperation has to end. And one of the suggestions that I made in response to the draft code against age fraud in sport 2025 is that there must be more stringent punishments, like penalties, not so much punishment, penalties like withdrawal of titles. Now, if there has been a badminton player who's won the junior national title and who has been found to have fudged his age, take that title away from him. Take the scholarship that has been given to him back. When you do this to one or two players, then everyone else will fall in line. There have been no exemplary punishments. The only one I know is of a sprinter in athletics, a big name who went to Jamaica to train for a while, came back and was found overage in a Khelo India competition. Nothing much happened. I don't think his title was even taken back. But when he went to compete in the junior national, his age was adjusted. He was sent back the first time, and then the next time around, they adjusted his age and made him compete in a higher category. I think this is very important. If we take the titles away, take the prizes away, take the prize money away, and ask the parents to refund some of the expenses involved in national camps, particularly if a junior player has been selected and his or her age has been found to be fraud, then I think more and more people will be afraid of fudging age. I think it's critical that it not just a suspension for 2 years, but also some kind of monetary fine, some kind of fiduciary penalties when they are laid on athletes and their parents and the coaches and maybe even the state associations. Then a lot of people will hesitate to fight their age. I think it's very critical that a lot more thought goes into how this code shapes up. I'm sure that the ministry has got plenty of feedback and is working on all of it, and hopefully we will see a code which is in better shape and form than the draft itself.
Yeah, so I think in this current draft, they have actually proposed what you said, the penalties, which include bans and even forfeiture of their titles. And I think in the second offense, it said that the draft proposes a permanent ban and even an FIR under the Bharatiya Nyaya Samhita. So there is even criminal action that is being proposed. Is that like a good precedent, or is that really necessary to create a real deterrence in your?
There are lots of provisions, Amita, which seem very good on paper, which seem very stringent, which seems to be deterrents for prevention of let's say fudging of age. But until they're implemented, these remain on paper. And I think this is one of the saddest things that in my own experience is that a lot of provisions remain on paper and very few people have the courage to stand up and say, yes, we are going to punish this young athlete. Just imagine a young athlete has gone and won an Asian championship or a Asian youth championship or a world cadet championship, and we discover that the age has been fudged. It's very difficult for us to admit to the world that we made a mistake. Now, that's why you need to punish people who do this, and I think the more stringent penalties are necessary. Yes, you can have all this on paper, but it's very, very important to follow them through. Do it for 2 or 3 cases. I will digress just that little bit, Amita. There is one coach who was known to have given an injection to a young athlete of a prohibited substance. And this athlete suffered a 4-year ban, and the National Anti-Doping Authority, to give them credit, took up this case of this coach and punished that coach, penalized the coach 4 years. He cannot be coaching any athlete for 4 years. This is a national level ban that has been implemented, and I find his name on the Athletics Integrity Unit site as well of the list of people who have been banned. So there has to be a central list like this. Sometimes you have to name and shame people for perpetrating fraud on the others. I think it's very critical that more provisions like this are introduced and they are actualized. I mean, there have been provisions before, but very few people have taken them seriously. Very few sport have taken them seriously. But it's very important. No sport federation gets annual recognition if it does not have a code against age fraud. But do their state associations have similar provisions? Not necessarily. Do their district associations have similar provisions? Not necessarily. And do the clubs at the bottom of the pyramid have such provisions? No, they don't. I think it's very important that this percolate down to the bottom. And as you pointed out earlier, Amita, at the grassroots level, we must want to clean Indian sport. We must want clean sport, and then we will find us rising in the global firmament.
So I also want to ask that again at a junior level, sometimes the young athlete may not really have control on the issues. Sometimes it's the parents who are in control of the situation. They are the ones who are actually fudging. Or let's say in certain setups, it is the coaches who are doing this. So there could be a case of sometimes the athletes are not complicit in it, but they at some point of time they realize, but it's too late for them to be doing anything about it. So we speak about stringent punishments. Should there also be a case for, let's say, rehabilitation or for a second opportunity for such an athlete, because they may have made a mistake for many reasons which could be in their control or outside of their control? Should they be given a second opportunity?
The question is, who's going to do this? You will want some kind of counseling, you will want some kind of guidance to be given to the athlete, to the parent and to the coaches. But who's going to do this? The problem is federations are already short of budgets. Imagine them having to do a workshop for a set of 50 parents whose children are indulging in age fraud, or who themselves have encouraged their children to bring in age fraud and compete in a lower age group category. Now, federations don't have the wherewithal to do this. So probably NGOs can take this up. Probably NGOs can take up their education and some kind of rehabilitation or some kind of counseling work. But this new code, the draft code, actually proposes that if you have a second offense, then you could be thrown out of competition altogether. So, which is stringent enough, which is deterrent enough for athletes not to try and do it a second time. I think the central database idea will actually work in favor of this sports code and ensure that we have a lot cleaner sport in the coming years than we already have at this point.
And Raj, I'm just asking again from my own understanding point of view. So there's a lot of focus on the documentation, right? Like you are supposed to submit your Aadhaar, you're supposed to submit your birth certificate. But isn't it the real problem in India? The birth certificate itself is, let's say, fudged. So how do you even address that problem when you're looking at a documentation level?
I think it's getting better now. Over the last few years, everything has been digitalized, even at the village level, thanks to the spread of internet and thanks to a lot of apps coming in, and how even the village panchayat chiefs can use mobile phones to upload data. I think if fudging doesn't happen at that stage, you will have a lot of clean sport. But it's unlikely that you can go tamper what is already on digital evidence. So my belief is that since there is a lot of digitalization of birth certificates that's happening now, and it's mandated, no longer handwritten birth certificates are no longer accepted. I think the last 7, 8, 10 years we've seen a lot of digitalization happening, and I believe that this can lead to a lot of cleaning up of Indian sport. Nobody can go and tamper the birth dates anymore unless the village panchayat chief is also getting involved, or unless the municipal administration is getting involved. And because of digitalization, I think every time there is a record change, it will be captured about it. You will know who's changed it. So nobody's going to take that risk. I believe that one of the best things about digitalization is that tampering cannot happen as much as it does at this point.
And also, are there any international best practices that we could learn from when it comes to age fraud? Like, how do countries in US, UK, how do they handle? Do they impose lifetime bans, or do they offer corrective measures?
This is primarily a South Asian problem, Amita. This is primarily, these parts of the world is where you're getting to see problems of age fudging. Very, very rare instance that in the US or even in UK you're going to find athletes whose ages are fudged, because their births and death registrar was very, very clear about what they would do back then. It's only now that we are perking up. It's only now that we are getting our act right, and therefore hopefully India will join the advanced nations in terms of not having to even have a code against age fraud, because if everything is digital, then you don't need any code as well to try and stop this, because fudging of age will become more difficult. The advanced countries have had the benefit of better ethics perhaps at all levels, and therefore you will not find so much fudging, and therefore they didn't find the need to have a code against age fraud as India has found.
And also I wanted to ask that if age fraud is also driven by lack of, we spoke about this, long-term athlete development, as a pathway, wouldn't it help to actually have a more skill-based progression rather than age-based? Does that help in any way?
Clearly, with the involvement of sports science, Amita, with more and more awareness of long-term athlete development pathways, people will want to embrace that. But parents and coaches are always in a hurry. This has been a problem in India because we've not learned to teach our sport correctly. If my daughter is a 10-year-old and is playing golf, I want her to start winning titles. I don't have the patience for her to be 20-year-old and start doing well for India. Long-term athlete development pathway is a good 8 to 10 to 12 years. Now, people don't have the patience. Everybody wants rewards overnight. If I'm investing monies in my daughter's welfare, if I'm investing monies in her evolution as an athlete, I want quick returns. There are very few parents who are willing to wait, who understand the long-term athlete development pathway, primarily because they haven't been talked about. Federations themselves are understanding long-term athlete development pathways now. State associations do not have so much understanding as the national federations have, and therefore the clubs also don't have. Now everyone is in a hurry. I mean, if I was playing basketball in YMCA and I'm playing at the league level in Hyderabad, if I'm going to fudge my age, it is going to impact only my team and the teams that I'm competing with. And if that can be sorted out, we will have a lot cleaner sport. And I think the digitalization at the national level is going to do that. And every state, if they do the same thing, we might actually see a lot better sport. We don't have to fight against age fraud too much in the
So,
coming years.
I thought I'll ask you about the implementation, but I think you've already spoken about that. That will this be effectively enforced, or would this be a paper, that just exists in spirit? So, to that, I think we've already spoken and you've shared.
No, I will reiterate this, Amita. At the risk of becoming a very unpopular person, I will reiterate this. There are a lot of good documents already exist on paper. Like I told you, CBI has investigated some table tennis players and the fudging of the age by officials. We need more of that, but they got no publicity at all. And therefore, others are still encouraged to go ahead and fudge their ages. Now, you need exemplary punishment and you need to speak about it. Until people hear about exemplary punishment, they're not going to be scared. They will think that all this exists only on paper and nothing is going to be implemented. Now, intentions are great. You need to back it up with action. And over the last 15 years or so, we haven't seen a lot of this. We are now realizing that some of our young athletes have done really well at the age group level, but are kind of figuring nowhere when it comes to international competition. The truth is that even at the world level, and World Athletics has done this, only 5% of the world junior champions have gone on to win the world championship. So, am I happy as a parent winning a world junior championship or winning an Asian competition because government will give me a reward? My child will get a job or will get educated in one of the fancy colleges. If I'm happy with that, then long-term athlete development pathway has no meaning. So if I'm only looking at short-term gains, how do I stop that from happening? For that to happen, the code has to be implemented in toto by everybody concerned, across the board and from top to bottom. Now, unless implementation is going to happen, you can make wonderful policies, but if you're not going to implement them well, we are going to be struggling as a sporting nation. I hope to God that I'm wrong about this, and I hope that India has taken the best step forward, primarily with the integration of digitalization into this code against age.
And I think it's interesting what you said about exemplary punishment, or just as a narrative, it's something that goes out and people actually get to hear. Because I was again reading a case instance of a cricketer who probably got banned by the Delhi state, but has in the recent coming up IPL, one of the teams has taken him on board. So in terms of exemplary, those are examples that you see out there, which almost seems to suggest that even if you flout, there isn't really a consequence and you can actually thrive. And especially wherever there is private sport which is not under, let's say, the government federations, there is always a possibility of things take.
No, I think the intention should be to stop the athlete from competing in the junior level in that particular age group. We don't want to punish an athlete for life, because good talent, and it's not the boy's problem or the girl's problem if the father or mother or if the coach has actually fudged it. They need to be punished. Don't punish the talented athlete. Give them the warning, and if they do it a second time, then you might want to ban them for life. It might seem harsh, but unless you do this, people are going to continue to do this. But I'm hopeful that digitalization will be one of the biggest strengths of this draft code against age fraud.
Right. Just curious, as a sport parent, do you think nothing in the draft suggests that a parent should be held accountable? There are punishment for the athlete, for the coaches, for the federations, but not really for the parent, who at least, like you said, at a junior level, could be an enabler. Is there a need for holding accountability at the level of the parent?
Within the sporting structure, a parent of a single child, for example, or parent of two children, you can punish them, but it's going to be of no consequence to them, unless the punishment is a jail term, right? Or if it is a massive financial penalty. I don't think that is going to happen. I think I'm happy with what they have done at this point of time, trying to identify coaches, giving them the responsibility. People who enter the names of the child for the first time are not usually parents, but these are coaches who get them registered to their clubs. These are sports officials who get them registered to their state associations, district associations, or state associations. And therefore, these are the people held accountable. I'm quite happy that parents have been left out of the ambit of this, because it is not the parent. Much of the time, it is the coaches who are forcing the parents to think in terms of fudging the age. There have been rare instances where parents themselves have been coaches and they have probably been responsible for fudging of the age. But in those cases, they can be tried as coaches and punished as
Great.
coaches.
So I think overall what I hear you say, Raj, is that the document is in the right direction, as it has been the case in the past with several other documents of that nature. The real thing is to enforce it, implement it with the stringent measures that are being recommended. Just as a final question for the different stakeholder groups who may be listening into this conversation, what would you recommend if someone's looking at putting in their inputs? What are the things that they should consider when they are giving their suggestions for the draft?
I think it's important that they first read the whole draft very carefully, because it got a lot of nuances. Like I said, digitalization is very, very critical. But if they want to do something, if they want to speak up against age fraud in sport, they must be able to cite some examples, not just hearsay, but they must be able to cite some examples and perhaps persuade the sports ministry to include a clause which says that if I have used a junior national certificate based on fudged age to get admission into a university, if that admission can be scrapped because my basic certificate is false, then I think it might make an impact even for parents. I think it's critical. This is the point that I missed out. But it's very important that everything that's been done on the basis of a fudged age certificate should be reviewed and should be taken back from the athlete, even if it means taking away a job, even if it means taking away a college admission or a university admission or scholarship. I think they should consider that and implement it. If that happens, even in one case, Amita, then Indian sport will be a lot cleaner than we have envisaged.
Fantastic. Thank you, Raj. Thanks for taking time out for this conversation. And I'm sure it will be useful for, especially for the sports parents who are listening into this conversation, and really recognize why it's important really not to give into short-term outcomes and look at, the long-term well-being and the success of the athlete.
Thank you so much, Amita, for this conversation. It's very important that parents also understand that they have a responsibility. I think if you're looking for short-term success, you might end up paying a long-term penalty. Parents might not be penalized, but the child will carry the scar for life. I know instances where youngsters have been struggling to deal with the fact that people call them age frauds, and to deal with that day in and day out sometimes can be very tough. And I hope and pray that all parents will persuade coaches not to indulge in any kind of age fraud. And I believe that we are in for a good time. I truly hope that the political spectrum across India, in every state, will embrace the sports code, the code against age fraud, and ensure that we move toward being a greater sporting.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Raj. Forward to speaking with you again.